In Ines Eldrin's world, where every day brings new challenges, the latest news that reached her ears was particularly disturbing. Audrey's ship, one of the finest in her newly created merchant fleet, was suddenly engulfed in flames. The reasons for this incident remained a mystery, generating many questions and no answers. Inez, not prone to inaction, took a deep breath of frustration and confusion, feeling the growing weight of the burden of responsibility resting on her shoulders. Inez was not just a celebrity, she was a symbol of steadfast ambition and unyielding will. She, being one of the few who could boast the title of Countess, undertook the task of reviving the nobility and prosperity of her family. Her family, once great and powerful, had gone through times of decline, but thanks to Inez's efforts, began to rise again from its knees, regaining its influence and wealth. However, recent events have pushed her to find new ways to maintain financial stability and avoid the threat of bankruptcy, which could have caused irreparable damage to her labors and dreams. Deciding that the time to act was urgent, Inez went to the bank. Her trip there was no mere stroll. It was a journey to find a solution that could secure her financial future and that of her family. She went there not only as a countess, but as a leader ready to face the challenges ahead, setting an example of indomitability and entrepreneurial acumen. In a world where uncertainty has become the new normal, Inez sought certainty, striving to ensure her family's stability and prosperity despite all obstacles. When Inez stepped over the threshold of the bank, the atmosphere inside changed noticeably. The staff and customers, who were used to the daily routine of financial transactions, could not remain indifferent to her presence. They were all well aware of her as an investment genius whose name was on the lips of everyone with any interest in the financial world. Even despite a series of recent setbacks that seemed to haunt her relentlessly, her reputation and influence remained unshaken. Inez, considered by many to be no less than the goddess of investments, was still admired and respected, for until recently she had demonstrated exceptional acumen and success in her financial endeavors. The last month, however, has put her unquestioned status to the test. A series of accidents, beginning with an unexpected fire on one of her ships and an attack on a bank, have called into question her ability to keep control of the situation. These failures seemed especially cruel given her previous accomplishments and contributions to the family's well-being. Nevertheless, her appearance at the bank emphasized not only her determination to face her current challenges, including financial ones, but also her unwavering spirit. In the back of her mind, Inez spent time thinking about what needs might be most important to unmarried ladies. After all, society often tends to discuss various aspects of girls' lives, including family values, education, social circle, and friendship bonds. However, for Inez, a shrewd and determined lady, all these aspects, though important, gave way to one fundamental element: financial independence. In her mind, money not only opened the door to freedom of choice and autonomy, but also provided a basis for stability and opportunities for development in any endeavor. The discussion of marriage, which so often came up in the conversations of those around her, seemed to her no more than a distraction. Not that Inez rejected the idea of marriage per se, but for her this aspect of life was not central to her list of priorities. The questions about marriage, to which she had answered so many times, could hardly confuse her or cause her to doubt the course of life she had adopted. Instead of delving into social expectations, Inez channeled all of her energy and time into activities of real benefit: making money. It was not just a means of livelihood for her, but a way for her to affirm her autonomy and her ability to stand on her own 2 feet without depending on anyone. In her mind, financial independence was much more than just material comfort. It was a symbol of personal freedom and self-assertion, allowing a woman to decide for herself which path to take in life without relying on stereotypes or prejudice. Seeing Inez's impressive financial success, many of those around her tried to attract her attention and win her favor, dreaming of drawing her into their families. They saw her not just as a lucky person, but as the key to their well-being, the source of possible wealth and stability. However, Inez, who possessed an extraordinary gift of foresight that allowed her to sense people's future failures at a touch, preferred to stay away from such suggestions. Her unique ability played an important role in investment activities because, thanks to it, Inez was able to avoid many financial disasters, calculating outcomes that for others remained unpredictable. This gift, so useful in the business sphere and personal life, turned into a reason for selectivity and caution in choosing close relationships. Realizing how easily her financial situation could attract unscrupulous people looking to take advantage of her fortune, Ines preferred to keep her distance. She felt that being alone was much easier and safer for her than risking her peace of mind and financial well-being by entering into a relationship based on self-interest. Ines thus became a symbol of independence and self-sufficiency, demonstrating that one does not have to compromise in one's personal life to achieve success. Her story served as a reminder that true strength lies in the ability to stay true to oneself and one's principles, despite all the temptations and challenges that fate may present. A month earlier, Inez's life had undergone a dramatic change when her unique abilities suddenly vanished, like a star fading into the night sky. It was the beginning of the end for her thriving business, which began to crumble like a cardboard house under the onslaught of a storm. It seemed, however, that the darkest pages of her story were yet to come. Now she found herself a hostage in a bank, a place where even the thought of such a twist of fate seemed unbelievable. Sitting among the other hostages, Inez struggled to assimilate the reality of her situation, thinking of her failure as a cruel joke of fate. A sudden scream from one of the robbers cut through the tense silence as he, in a fit of anger, tore up the documents he expected to be money. These papers belonged to the man sitting next to Ines, who, unlike the other hostages, this guy, Khalid Asdon, remained remarkably calm, as if he was detached from the chaos going on. It could not fail to attract attention. A moment later, the burglar's gaze settled on Ines Eldrin, and a spark of a new plan flashed in his eyes. Seeing that she was not just a hostage but a valuable asset, he decided that she could be the key to a large ransom. At that moment, Inez's fate took a new, unexpected turn, promising more trials on her already tortured path. Amidst the tense atmosphere, with every hostage wrapped in fear and uncertainty, an event occurred that took even time's breath away. Khalid, who until that moment had seemed one of many, suddenly performed an action packed with courage and determination. His hand, quick and precise as a lightning strike, left one of the robbers defeated on the floor, causing a wave of shock and amazement in everyone present. Despite the sudden burst of action, Khalid remained unfazed, his face devoid of any emotion, as if he had accomplished something mundane. This act of daring, however, attracted the attention of the other robbers, who, seized with anger at the fall of their comrade, rushed upon Khalid. However, they had clearly underestimated him. With a lightness like a leaf dancing in the wind, Khalid drew his sword. The weapon in his hands was not just a tool of defense, but an extension of himself, crushing his attackers with such grace and efficiency that the last of the robbers was incapacitated in just a moment. When the dust had settled and a stunned silence filled the space, Khalid, without wasting a moment, turned to one of the bank employees. His question about accepting the documents sounded almost absurd amid the chaos that had just unfolded, but there was an unwavering seriousness in his voice. This moment of action and Khalid's follow-up question not only demonstrated his incredible determination and ability to act in a critical situation, but also the enigmatic nature of his personality, raising questions about his motives and past. After the startling outcome of the bout left everyone stunned, Khalid faced unforeseen disappointment. The bank employee's response that the timing was extremely inopportune to review his documents dampened his mood. At this point, Ines, who had been watching, offered to help. With warmth of heart and a desire to settle the situation, she offered Khalid passage to the VIP lounge, trying to ease his burden of failure. But when Ines was touched by Khalid, something unexpected happened. Her seemingly long-forgotten ability was suddenly activated, revealing to her secrets hidden from the eyes of the world. Like voices from another dimension, information about Khalid's future filled her mind. She learned that he would be accused of insanity caused by his demonic sword named Tigarios. This sword, shrouded in mystical legends and dark lore, is associated with a crime against nature itself. The cutting down of a sacred tree, an act that can shake the foundations of the world and incur the wrath of the deities. Ines, suddenly aware of the events to come, felt the burden of responsibility. Her view of Khalid had changed. He was no longer just a hostage to circumstance, but a man whose fate was closely intertwined with the fate of the world. This discovery not only reignited a spark of hope in her to revive her lost ability, but also raised questions about what action to take next. In one dramatic yet exhilarating moment, when the tension in the air was more palpable than ever, the lives of the characters in our story were suddenly interrupted by an invasion of guards. They rushed in with all the determination and readiness for action that usually accompanies such moments. However, to their utter surprise, they found that the threat had already been neutralized. The robbers they had expected to meet in battle lay lifeless on the floor, defeated by none other than their own captain, Khalid Asdon. Khalid, whose name has long been synonymous with failure and bad luck, this time proved himself to be a true hero, turning perceptions of himself upside down. This unexpected development immediately spread among the population, causing a wide resonance. The situation of Ines was no less exciting to the servants, who came anxiously to the bank, anxious about her condition. Despite her general concern, Ines was preoccupied with very different thoughts. Her whole inner world was engulfed in only one thought, one feeling, relief and joy that her long-lost ability had returned to her. This moment of discovery for Ines was truly transformative, as what seemed lost forever once again found its way back to her, filling her heart with hope and faith in the future. That afternoon, when the atmosphere had not yet cooled from the previous events, the maid, concerned about Inez's condition after such unpredictable turns of fate, had persistently suggested that she seek medical attention. There was a genuine concern for Inez's health in her voice, and her anger at the robbers for causing her distress only added credibility to her words. Ines, however, sensing the return of her unique ability, had very different plans in mind. She rejected the maid's offer with a determination few could have expected, declaring that her path lay to the racecourse. Ines was determined to use her gift to bet on the horse she believed would win. Later, already in the comfort of her home, Ines shared the details of her trip to the racetrack with ease and a smile on her face. She recounted how those around her, upon learning of her choice, did not hold back their ridicule and doubts about the sanity of her decision. Skepticism and disbelief were their first reactions to such an unexpected choice, but fate seemed to be playing in Ines's favor. When her horse crossed the finish line first, proving an unequivocal victory, the crowd's reaction changed. Ines could now afford to smile in response to the disbelief and ridicule that accompanied her decision. This moment of victory was not only a proof of her inner strength and belief in herself, but also a symbol of triumph over the doubts and skepticism of those around her, confirming that her unique ability is a gift of true value. At dawn the next day, while hope still lingered in Inez's heart, she faced a harsh reality. Her most precious ability had left her again, leaving only emptiness and despair in its place. This sudden disappearance of the gift forced Ines to face a number of difficult emotions, but instead of giving up, she decided to look for answers. The name of Khalid Asdon kept flashing through her thoughts, the man at whose touch her ability had instantly returned, like a mysterious key that opened a lock. Ines decides to find out everything she can about Khalid, certain that he plays a key role in the mystery of her ability. Khalid was a rather controversial figure in society. A bachelor and orphanage boy, his life took a sharp turn when he was adopted by the noble family of the Marquis. However, instead of his past becoming forgotten, it only seemed to add shadows to his reputation. Worst of all, his image was colored by the association with the demonic sword that Khalid wielded. It was rumored among the people that the sword possessed a bloodthirsty essence, and Khalid, its wielder, was nicknamed the Bloodthirsty Killer. Adding to this grim reputation was the spreading belief that Khalid would inevitably die in a year due to a curse placed on the blade. These circumstances created an aura of mystery and danger around him, at the same time awakening in Ines not only fear but also overwhelming curiosity. It seemed to her that the unraveling of her abilities was closely intertwined with the fate of this mysterious man who was shunned and condemned by society. In a world where magic exists and ancient legends come to life, a demonic sword with dark and mysterious powers appears. This sword is not just an object, it is the bearer of an ancient curse, according to which its appearance heralds the beginning of a cycle during which the sword seeks a master. But to be chosen by the sword is not an honor, but rather a severe test of the soul and mind. According to legend, wielding a sword entails the inevitable madness of the wielder as the end of the cycle approaches. Legend has it that at the end of each such period, the master of the sword must be taken to an ancient temple to end his torment there and free his soul from the burden of the curse. However, history knows of no instance of any sword wielder resigning himself to his fate and willingly surrendering himself into the hands of the paladins, brave and fearless warriors of light whose task it is to perform the ritual of liberation in the temple. These wielders, gripped by the dark power of the sword, preferred to fight to the last, tempted by the promises of might and power that the sword bestowed upon them rather than give themselves up to the mercy of fate. Khalad, the current wielder of the sword, found himself at the heart of this ancient drama. Fate had destined him for a role in this eternal struggle between light and darkness, and by calculation, he was only 6 months away from the fateful day when he would be brought to the temple. This period of time was filled with tension and anticipation. Each day passed in the company of the sword brought Khaled closer to the inevitable finale, tormenting him not only with his impending fate, but also with the incessant dilemmas of choosing between his own salvation and his allegiance to the grim fate imposed upon him by this ancient artifact. Ines faced the daunting task of finding a way to meet Khaled, whose time was split between home and work, leaving little chance for a chance or scheduled meeting. However, with resourcefulness and determination, she hatched a plan. Her close examination of Khaled's daily life revealed one recurring moment when he became vulnerable to her interference: his monthly visits to his favorite gun store. The place, filled with a variety of edged and firearms, reflected one of Khaled's passions, making his visits there constant and predictable. Determined to act, Ines resorted to an unorthodox and daring move. She bought out a gun store. Such a move was not only bold, but it also showed her deep desire to meet with Khaled, allowing her to take charge of the situation. With control of the store now, Ines set up the conditions for the meeting that were completely in line with her plan. She surrounded herself with store employees who, succumbing to her charm or magic, were willing to contribute to her scheme. These people, now under her influence, were part of her carefully planned scene for the upcoming meeting. While waiting for Khaled, Ines spent her time among the racks and display cases filled with gleaming blades and impressive firearms, each with a story to tell. This store, now the site of their upcoming meeting, was full of tension and anticipation. Ines, inspired by her goal and bolstered by the loyalty of her charmed employees, waited for the moment Khaled crossed the threshold of the store, unaware of the momentous change in her routine trip for more supplies. Observing the behavior of the staff, Ines couldn't help but notice their surprise and some relief evident in their looks and manner of speaking. It was obvious that the previous owner of the store had kept them under strict control, leaving little room for personal initiative or even the slightest show of disobedience. This realization led Ines to think about possible changes in store management that could not only improve the atmosphere for employees, but also make the place more attractive to visitors. Ideas began to ripen in her mind about innovations that could transform the store, bringing a fresh breeze into her daily life. In this moment of reflection and planning, while Ines was completely absorbed in her thoughts about the future of the store, Khaled entered the store space. His appearance was the familiar and long-awaited event she had been preparing for. Ines, without wasting a moment, immediately approached him with a greeting, informing him of her new status as shopkeeper. Her voice sounded confident and welcoming, a genuine interest in making Khaled feel important and welcome. Khaled's reaction, however, was not what Ines had expected. Instead of words, an exchange of greetings, or even a simple nod of recognition, he remained silent. His face was impenetrable, betraying no hint of his thoughts or feelings about the sudden change in ownership of his favorite place. In that silence, filled with unspoken questions and reticence, Khaled did something unexpected. He held his sword forward. This gesture, mysterious and full of secret meaning, was another twist in their interaction, adding a new, intriguing layer to the story. She reached out for the sword that lay on the table in front of her. That sword, with its history and power, seemed to call to her, promising unknown possibilities. At that moment, her fingers accidentally touched Khaled, a mysterious character shrouded in rumors and myths. And as soon as their skin made contact, Ines's ability, which had been silent for some time like a monster that had fallen asleep, was suddenly awakened to life. Ines was overcome with joy, for her unique gift, her ability to capture the most intimate moments and secrets, had returned to her. In the silence that followed, she heard that Khaled, a man with a reputation as a ruthless warrior and bloodthirsty killer, possessed an unexpectedly trivial weakness. The fateful moment for him will be not a battle on the field of honor, not a duel with a sworn enemy, but the moment when his favorite dish, probably exquisite and refined, will be sold out right in front of his nose. This small thing, seemingly insignificant to someone with such a powerful and terrifying image, turned out to be his real downfall. Ines was shocked. How could such an insignificant everyday moment become a major test for a man whose name made his enemies tremble? Discovering this vulnerability in Khaled, contrary to all expectations, did not diminish his greatness in her eyes. Rather, it added depth to his character, showing that even the mightiest of us have our own, sometimes ridiculous weaknesses that make them more human, closer, and more understandable. This incredible detail, unexpectedly discovered by Ines, was evidence that in a world where strength and power are valued above all else, the place for simple human joys and frustrations remains unchanged. In this exciting episode of their unexpected meeting, Ines took the first step toward unraveling Khalid's silent, enigmatic behavior. She, with hope in her heart, tried to play out a scene of ignorance, asking him with artificial curiosity if he was the hero protector from the bank. However, instead of the expected confirmation, or at least a word to himself, Khalid only shook his head briefly, leaving Ines in a state of surprise and even more puzzlement. His silence was loud, almost palpable, striking her in the heart. Not understanding the reasons for this reticence and perhaps sensing an underlying connection, Ines didn't give up. She began to slowly and hopefully dispel the fog of mystery surrounding Khalid, explaining that she was the one he had once rescued from the trap of fear and despair by being held hostage in that very bank drama. Her words, filled with gratitude and mild surprise at his silence, floated toward him, but seemed to shatter against the invisible wall of his determination to remain silent. Khalid, like a sculpture, remained silent, defying Ines's attempts to find a clue to him. In this kaleidoscope of emotion and uncertainty, Ines, guided by a sense of kindness and perhaps a secret hope of renewing their unusual bond, held out her card to him. The gesture was simple, but deeply symbolic. It carried not only an offer of help or an invitation to dialogue, but also a silent request for understanding, for a bridge between the past and the present that they could build together. The business card in Khalid's hands was not just a piece of paper, but a sign, an opportunity for a new beginning, whether he accepted her call for openness or continued his silent wandering alone. When at last Khalid broke his silence, his words were full of determination. He promised to return as soon as his sword was ready. But Ines, whose heart could not bear the thought of his departure, was not ready to let him go so easily. Her words were full of conviction and offers of help. She wanted to be his ally against all the failures that were weighing on his soul. Khalid's reaction to her suggestion was immediate and sharp. He asked if she was trying to exploit the situation for her own selfish purposes, if she was trying to capitalize on his problems. This moment was saturated with tension, for his question touched on the deepest fears of trust and betrayal. However, Ines's answer was clear and sincere, revealing her pure intentions. She confidently stated that she did not need material goods, for she was already well off. Her motives were pure, and she sought only understanding and support. In the midst of this tense exchange, Ines performed an act of determination and courage. Suddenly, she pulled Khalid against her in a powerful and protective gesture, pulling him away from an object that had suddenly appeared in their path and was rushing at breakneck speed. This action was more than just a physical instinct for protection. It symbolized her willingness to be his shield, not only in the face of physical threat, but also in fighting the inner demons that tormented him. In this moment, Ines wasn't just saving Khalid from imminent danger. She was also trying to save him from his own doubts and fears, seeking to strengthen a bond between them that could withstand any adversity. In an atmosphere filled with anticipation and hope, Ines approached Khalid with a promise that could change the trajectory of their shared journey. She offered him an arrangement whereby she would warn him of impending mishaps, becoming a kind of Pharos, lighting his way through the fog of the future. The offer was not only a gesture of trust, but also a demonstration of her willingness to stand by his side in any trials that might come their way. To back up her offer and show that her words carried weight, Ines decided to give Khalid a token of her trust, a pledge of her intentions. She shared with him seemingly insignificant but important information on how to have time to grab the desired stew, prompting him to come get it earlier than usual. This moment, though seemingly mundane, carried deep meaning. Ines was willing to share with him not only warnings about global failures, but also small tips that could bring joy in everyday life. After offering her help and sharing her valuable advice, Ines dismissed Khalid, leaving him alone with his musings. In that gesture of letting go lurked not only confidence in his words, but also respect for his personal space and time to make a decision. She stood before him like a trusted partner, ready to fight and win together, yet fully respecting his right to make his own choices. At this point in Ines and Khalid's relationship, a challenge matured, a choice between accepting help and overcoming future obstacles together, or continuing the journey alone. Ines, for her part, did her best to show that she was willing to be there for her, to share both joys and hardships. The orb was now at Khalad's side, whose decision could not only determine his own future, but also the future of their relationship. The moment the mysterious energy enveloped the space between Ines and Shamore, the air around them shimmered with invisible light. Ines, whose figure seemed to be filled with vitality again, shared with Shamore the secret of her inner strength with a deep sigh of relief. The power that slumbered in her veins was awakened at the touch of the ancient and mysterious Khalad, something only a select few knew about. Shamore, a stalwart mercenary who possessed not only skill with weapons but also amazing loyalty, was among the few who shared this secret with Ines. They were bound together not only by a common purpose but by ties of trust unknown until that moment. Their story began the day fate brought them together. The day Shamore, banished from her home and without the support of her family, met Ines. Ines, in turn, seeing in Shamore not just a vagrant but a talented warrior, offered her a helping hand and a place under the sun in her wanderings. The relationship between them was built not only on the basis of necessity and benefit, but also on mutual respect and understanding. An unexpected turn in their saga was the moment when Shamore, no longer just a companion but a loyal friend of Ines, gave her an invitation to the viewing. Seeing is not just a custom or tradition, it is an opportunity for Ines to step outside of her ordinary life and embark on a new stage of her journey, perhaps even more dangerous and exciting than all her previous adventures. Ines felt fatigue deep in her mind, growing like a fog slowly consuming the expanse of her thoughts. Again and again the invitations to see her were a heavy burden on her shoulders, causing only irritation and unwillingness to continue this endless game of social expectations. Her heart yearned for freedom, for the wind of change, not the bonds of marriage that could turn into a golden cage. Looking for a way out of this vicious circle, Ines allowed the idea of creating an illusion, a false fiance, which could become her shield from annoying suitors. But who could play this role? There was no suitable candidate in her entourage who could convincingly play this unusual performance. The decision came to her suddenly, like a spark in a dark forest. Ines realized that the only way to inner peace was to immerse herself in her work, for now that her ability was alive again with Khaled, she had not only the source of her power, but also a direction for action. However, even 3 days after this decision, Khaled still hadn't shown up. This absence was a test for Ines, causing a wave of doubt and anxiety in her soul. Time passed, and Khaled's silence shrouded her reality in a thick veil of uncertainty. Each day without news from him was a reminder of the fragility of her plans and the fact that even her newfound strength could not protect her from all the hardships of fate. At that moment, Ines felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders more acutely than anything else, and realized that every choice she made would have a series of consequences that would change not only her life, but also the fates of those around her. On one ordinary day filled with routine, Ines's life took an unexpected turn when her faithful maid, Shamore, brought a stack of letters. Among the many envelopes tied with ribbons and sealed with wax, one in particular stood out. It was framed in red paper, symbolizing nothing less than a marriage proposal. Ines, whose life up to that moment had flowed in a measured and peaceful course, felt at the sight of the letter an excitement intermingled with the anticipation of unknown changes. But the real shock awaited her, not in the color of the envelope, but in the sender's name read on the back. The letter was from the Marquis of Asdon, a name that resonated in her mind with particular force. Marquis Asdon was none other than Khalid's father, a man whose name gave Ines mixed feelings. This fact stumped her, forcing her to weigh the pros and cons of this unexpected development. After gathering her thoughts and overcoming her initial shock, Ines, who had preferred to avoid dubious social events all her life, decided to take a bold step. For the first time in her life, she decided to go to a viewing party. This decision marked a turning point when the routine of her life was left behind, giving way to new opportunities and perhaps the beginning of a story worth telling. Thus, this day brought a bright color to the canvas of her life, promising changes that could rewrite her future. Standing at the threshold of a new chapter of her life, Ines felt a mixture of excitement and anticipation, preparing to face her destiny, which seemed so unpredictable. At the same time, on the grounds of Asdon Manor, there was bustle and anticipation of the upcoming significant event. The maids and servants, like bees in a hive, deftly went about their business, trying to tidy up every corner of the luxurious estate. At the center of all these preparations was Dichat, Khalad's brother, whose future was about to be decided on this momentous day. Dighat himself, with a character and convictions opposite to the ease and carelessness of ordinary preparations, looked at the coming events through the prism of his doubts and discontent. Dishah's displeasure was rooted in his belief that Khalad's presence at the viewing could negatively affect the outcome of the entire event. He believed that Khalid, with his unorthodox manners and unpredictable behavior, could unwittingly disrupt the carefully planned course of events, turning the meeting from a graceful dance into a disaster. Digat, more than anyone else, knew his brother and felt apprehensive that his presence would be the very note that would disrupt the harmony of the events to come. Nevertheless, the grandeur and prestige of the Asdon family required a show of unity and steadfastness in the face of guests. The family sought to appear before Ines in all its grandeur, creating the illusion of an ideal family where each member contributes to the common good and prosperity. It was like a theater production, where everyone has a role to play and the backstage hides the real feelings and emotions. In this atmosphere of anticipation and tension, Asdon Manor was preparing for an encounter that could change the fate of all its inhabitants. Digat, the embodiment of strength and determination, stood on the threshold of events that could both strengthen and shake the foundations of his existence. At this time, a wave of change invisibly enveloped the estate, preparing to overturn the usual way of life of its inhabitants, leaving only questions about the future. The Asdon family, whose name was known far beyond their domain, saw the upcoming union not only as a means of strengthening family ties, but also as a strategic move in the political arena. Expectations for the marriage were high. They saw in this union an opportunity to greatly expand their influence and gain access to new resources and connections. Dreams of moving into Ines's luxurious mansion or building a new house with the dowry wealth glittered in their eyes like stars in the night sky, promising a new era of prosperity and grandeur for the Asdons. Meanwhile, Khalid, whose name is inextricably linked with the fates of all the participants in this story, stood aside, weary of the maelstrom of events in which fate had drawn him. His gaze, staring off into the distance, seemed to be searching for answers to unspoken questions, trying to find solace in silent contemplation. In this scene, where everyone was consumed with their own hopes and reflections, Khalid appeared as the personification of inner weariness from the burden of expectations placed on his shoulders. On the other hand, Ines, whose heart fluttered in anticipation of the meeting, rushes towards her destiny, realizing the importance of the upcoming viewing with Dikat. She felt like the heroine of a novel whose chapter had not yet been written, and at the same time she was grateful to fate for the unexpected turn that had given her a chance to see Khalid again. Thanks to Digat's persistence, she was on the threshold of events that promised to be the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Deep down, Ines harbored the hope that the encounter would change her destiny, anticipating the opportunity to intertwine her story with that of the Asdon house. When Ines stepped over the threshold of the Marquis's stately home, she immediately sensed the tension in the air. This house seemed to hold 1,000 secrets, and one of them was the alienation that enveloped Khalid. It didn't take a psychic to sense the thin veil of coldness that permeated the relationship between him and his family. Ines suggested that the root of the misunderstanding lay in Khalid's past, in his orphanage upbringing, which was perhaps considered a stain on the aristocratic Marquis family. Surrounded by representatives of the ancient family, Ines witnessed them trying their best to make the meeting look glamorous and luxurious, showing contrived kindness and interest. Her attention was drawn to the carefully chosen words and gestures that were designed to impress. In this flood of hypocritical concern and feigned enthusiasm, Ines found the strength to maintain gratitude and courtesy. She turned to Dikat, expressing her gratitude for the invitation and the opportunity to be among them. Ines's gesture was full of sincerity and politeness, though deep down she felt like a stranger at this feast of contrived cordiality and hidden contradictions. When Disha touched Ines's hand as a sign of respect and greeting, something unusual happened that went unnoticed to those around him. The intimate gesture that is the kiss of the hand activated Ines's latent abilities, allowing her to see beyond the veil of the future for a moment. She had learned that she would end up saying no to Disha, though it wasn't a revelation to her. After all, deep in her heart, Ines already realized the decisions to be made along the way. The scene change came abruptly as the attention of the assembled Mark was diverted to Calidus. They voiced the possibility of his banishment, which was a gesture of clear disapproval or even a threat. This moment was a test for everyone present, because every word and gesture could change the course of events. However, Ines, showing incredible courage and sense of justice, did not remain silent. She openly declared her joy at seeing Khaled by her side, thus giving a sign of solidarity and support. Her gesture of extending her hand to Khaled was more than just a formality. It was an action overflowing with meaning and symbolism, demonstrating her cunning, for the touch would reactivate her power. Ines has thus become a beacon of light in the darkness, providing Khaled with not only support, but also hope that not all is lost in this complicated world of relationships. The moment Inez's unknowable power came to life, unleashing a wave of foresight upon her, she was confronted with a revelation that shook her to the core. Amidst the intertwining fates and secrets of the aristocratic house of the Marquis, she learned of her impending engagement to Calidus. This knowledge came as not just a surprise to her, but a source of deep disappointment. For in addition to the unexpectedness of the situation, it saddened her that Khalid apparently shared her feelings of disappointment, not at all happy about the impending union. Inez felt a mixture of confusion and sadness as she saw Calidus disappear from their shared circle like a shadow, leaving her to ponder the future. His sudden departure was like a silent protest against a decision imposed upon him, for there was probably a spark of rebellion in his heart, or perhaps an unwillingness to bind himself to one who did not own his heart. After this fleeting and highly emotional moment, Inez headed deeper into the estate with the Marquises. Step by step, traversing the distance across the marble floors and past the majestic portraits of her ancestors, she was immersed in pondering her own place in this confusing scenario of events. The walk seemed to be a passage not only through the corridors of the manor, but also through the corridors of his own thoughts and feelings, an exploration of the boundaries between personal desires and duties imposed by circumstances and traditions. As soon as they were seated at a table filled with exquisite dishes and adorned with the most sumptuous serving utensils, the Marquise got down to business without preamble. From her lips came a question about Inez's readiness to begin marriage negotiations that sounded almost like a sentence sealing the young girl's fate. At the same time, the Marquise did not miss the opportunity to exalt Disha's virtues, describing him as an ideal groom, the embodiment of valor and romance. She even mentioned that Descartes had composed a song in honor of Inez, as if by this act the fate of their union might be sealed. As if seeking to speed up the process, the Marquise moved on to the question of the date of the engagement, apparently expecting to hear a prompt and unqualified answer. Inez, however, possessing not only nobility of soul but also strength of will, stopped the flow of her certainties by stating her own terms. This moment was not just a turning point in the conversation, but a reflection of Inez's inner strength, her desire not to be a pawn in someone else's game, even if that game was played in the gilded halls of aristocracy. Her words sounded like a challenge to traditions and expectations, like the voice of modernity in the face of eternal orders. Ines, standing on the threshold of a decisive change in her life, was not going to back down or submit unconditionally. She was ready to negotiate, but only on her own terms, showing confidence in herself and her right to choose her own path. In the hall flooded with soft light where the Marquises were gathered, they were enveloped in an aura of grandeur and nobility, misunderstood Inez's words and thought that she wanted to announce the wedding at once. Their plans, however, were quickly overturned by Inez's unexpected announcement. At that moment, time seemed to stand still, and her every word was weighed with special attention. Inez, standing before the assembled crowd, announced with a strength and confidence that came from her every gesture that her heart belonged not to Dihat, whose name was already on everyone's lips as a future groom, but to Calidus. Calidu, whose name evoked a story filled with tragedy and bad luck. Since his childhood, Khalid has faced a series of setbacks that seem to follow him every step of the way. His story began when the Marquises, driven by a desire to share their wealth and love, welcomed him into their family. However, Khalid's happiness was short-lived. Not even a year later, the Marquises heard the cry of a newborn baby in the house. They had a son of their own. From that moment on, Calidus, once accepted as a member of the family, began to gradually turn into a shadow that lost its place and importance in the eyes of the Marquis. His existence seemed to have become a mere reminder of the times when they needed him. Khalad's life was filled with failures. Each of his days was like a test, an endless series of disappointments and losses. In this world of darkness and despair, the only ray of light, a source of comfort and hope, was fencing. This art became for him not just a hobby or a way of self-expression, but a lifeline that kept him afloat in the ocean of despair. Fencing gave him purpose, gave his life meaning, and allowed him to gain the self-confidence he lacked in his everyday life. Through his perseverance, talent, and endless hours of training, Khaled excelled in the art, eventually leading him to the rank of knight. But what was his surprise and horror when fate seemed to turn against him once again? At the moment when he reached the pinnacle, ready to uphold honor and defend the weak, his sword, the symbol of knightly honor and valor, betrayed him in the most unexpected way. Among the many legendary and powerful swords that could be worthy companions for a knight, it was the demon sword that chose him. The choice of this demonic sword didn't just add gravity to Khaled's already difficult fate, it turned his life into a constant struggle not only with external enemies, but also with the sword itself, its insidious and unpredictable character. Each time he swung his sword, Khaled not only fought his opponents but also waged an endless war with himself, trying to keep the demon under control and not let it get the upper hand. This duality of existence, where one of the knight's greatest attributes becomes his greatest challenge, only exacerbated the tragic nature of his fate, making his path even more dangerous and unpredictable. In the spacious hall, where every corner is filled with luxury and nobility, Inez's words rang out like thunder. Her determination to be betrothed to Calidus caused a wave of amazement and bewilderment among those present. The marquises, whose faces reflected a variety of emotions from surprise to outright indignation, could not conceal their excitement. Voices of their protest filled the hall like a squall in a storm, claiming that Khaled was a symbol of the failure that could now touch their own homes. But Ines, despite the indignation of the assembled, remained undeterred. Her gaze, full of determination and confidence, was directed at Khaled, as if through this gesture she wanted to support him, to show him that his past did not matter in the face of their shared future. Amidst the din of protesting voices, she found the strength to declare that she liked Calidus, which was tantamount to calling out the entire hall, anyone who thought he was a curse and a loser. Then, without giving the Marca a chance to continue their attacks, Ines invited Calidus to go for a walk. That moment when they left the hall together, filled with shock and disbelief, was the epitome of true love, which knows no barriers and is above all superstition and prejudice. Khaled, wandering through an uncertain space far from Ines like the embodiment of an enigma covered in fog. Ines, sensing the distance between them as something more physical than emotional, took a few determined steps towards him, seeking to reduce this space that had become between them. In this world where every step mattered, her movement toward Khaled was full of determination and questions, but not all of them were clear to Ines herself. Khaled in turn turned to her, a flicker of bewilderment mixed with mild amazement in his eyes. In the depths of his gaze lurked a question he could not or would not articulate aloud. Why did she, Ines, wish to join her destiny with his? The question hovering in the air between them was almost palpable, but Ines chose to appear unfazed in the face of his reticence. Instead of touching on this delicate string of their relationship, she turned the conversation in a completely different direction, asking about whether Calidus had managed to taste the stew that day. The stew, an unexpected turn in their dialogue, seemed to bring a certain lightness to the strained atmosphere. Khaled, as if awakening from deep thought, remembered the moment when the last stew had been in his hands, thanks to Inez's advice. Gratitude for Ines flashed in that memory, but he didn't go into the details of his taste experience. Instead, Khaled, as if trying to bring their conversation back to more serious topics, asked Ines to stay on top of the main topic of their conversation. After the atmosphere between Ines and Khaled had lightened slightly, Ines, gathering her courage, decided to ask the question that had been in the air but had not yet been voiced, whether Khaled had a lover. The question sounded simple, but in its echo lurked a depth of undiscovered feelings and unspoken assumptions. Khaled's answer was short and clear. He had no one. This news, like a fresh breeze, dispelled some of the fog of uncertainty, but at the same time added new shades to the palette of their relationship. Without giving herself time to think, Ines moved on to the next, even more daring question. She asked if Khaled would be willing to pretend to be her chosen one. That question, exploding in the silence of their dialogue, caused Khalad to tense up. He was stunned by this unexpected turn, and in his eyes could be seen a variety of feelings, from surprise to hidden anxiety. Ines hastened to explain her request, noting that she didn't want a relationship herself. She was only looking for a way to avoid further marriage proposals from others, seeing Khaled as a shield against unwanted attention. This suggestion from Ines gave Khaled a new perspective in which he had not expected to find himself. On the one hand, pretending seemed like a harmless way to help Ines in her quest for privacy and freedom from other people's expectations. On the other hand, it put him in an unusual position where the lines between reality and pretense could easily blend, bringing new nuances to their relationship. In this complex interaction between two personalities, each seeking a different kind of freedom, a dynamic was born, full of unpredictable twists and turns and opportunities for both. Ines, weighing her words with care, as if picking them up from the treasury of her mind, emphasized that Calidus seemed to her the ideal candidate for their unusual union. She emphasized his virtues, not forgetting to mention his lack of enthusiasm for her, which she felt was a distinct advantage in their situation. This moment acted as a guarantee that their relationship would be built on honesty and mutual understanding, without unnecessary emotional turmoil that could complicate the pretense. Ines further hinted that in their unique union, Khalad would be able to find not only peace of mind from intrusive marriage proposals, but also significantly improve her position in life. She confidently declared that she could provide him with comfort and security, promising him freedom from the misery that had haunted him so far. Ines's words sounded like a promise of a new life, full of stability and confidence in the future, but Khalad, without losing his inherent sobriety of thought, expressed fears that his failures could spill over to Ines as well. He suggested that adversity, like dark clouds, could envelop them both, casting a shadow over the relationship that had just begun. This moment was important because it showed that Khaled was thinking not only of himself, but also of Ines's well-being, even if they would only pretend to be a couple. Despite Khalad's expressed fears, Ines showed not the slightest sign of fear or hesitation. Her determination was unbreakable, and she faced possible difficulties with indomitable optimism. This moment was a testament to her fortitude and her willingness to overcome any obstacle to achieve her goal. Ines was sure that together they would be able to curb any misfortune because their union would be built on mutual support and understanding, which is a strong foundation for any relationship, even one as unusual as their own. In the stillness of the night, as darkness enveloped everything around him, the sharp blade of the sword filled the space with its stories. These stories were not ordinary, they were filled with emotions and memories. Especially memorable was the moment when the sword took pleasure in describing the expression of disappointment on Dishat's face. This expression, according to the sword, was so picturesque and full of emotion that it could not leave one indifferent. Khalad, as a sword wielder, tried to quiet his chattering blade. It seemed to him that he shouldn't be so frank about feelings and emotions, especially at this late hour. But the sword ignored Khalad's attempts to shut him up and went on with his story. He moved on to another subject, Ines's proposal. Sword, with a certain amount of irony in his voice, reminded Khaled of Ines's suggestion of a fictitious relationship. He noted that Ines must be crazy to think of such a plan. An intriguing question was posed by the sword. Would Khalad be willing to accept such an unusual offer? Khalad felt an inner conflict as he pondered the answer. On the one hand, the idea seemed absurd and risky to him. On the other hand, he was in no hurry to refuse Ines's offer without a second thought. His main fear was betrayal and deception. Khalad couldn't understand Ines's ulterior motives, for on the face of it, she had nothing to gain from such a relationship. This night was full of reflection and internal struggles for Khaled. His conversation with the sword was not a simple conversation. It was more of a clash between his own fears and doubts and the ruthless honesty and directness of the sword. Lastly, the sword noted that Ines's suggestion might be justified by some ability. In the spacious and cozy halls of the estate, Ines, surrounded by luxury and silence, found moments for personal reflection. She couldn't hide her satisfaction at how well her affairs had been going lately. With the return of her unique ability, Ines had skillfully negotiated several lucrative deals that had already begun to bear the first fruits. This success added to her confidence and gave her an optimistic outlook for the future. Despite her business accomplishments, however, her thoughts increasingly returned to her personal life, specifically the proposal she had made to Khalid. Inez admitted to herself that the idea of a fake relationship with Khalid had not been part of her original plan. However, as she considered her options, she realized that she was unlikely to find a better candidate than Khalid. His high status in society, his benevolent and disinterested but respectful attitude toward Inez, and the unusual fact that it was his presence that allowed her to temporarily regain her abilities, all made Khalid the perfect partner to accomplish her goals. Sitting in the comfortable armchair of her manor, Ines pondered all aspects of her decision. She realized that joining Khalid in such an unusual union opened up new horizons and opportunities for her. Not only was it convenient from a practical standpoint, but it could be the key to even greater successes and achievements in the future. A relationship that began with calculation could lead to a powerful alliance capable of influencing the course of events in their world. Inez felt she was on the cusp of something great, and her decision regarding Khalid played no small part in that. However, despite all the advantages Inez saw in a potential alliance with Khalid, she couldn't ignore one significant problem tarnishing his image: his terrible reputation. Khalid's scandalous past and his notoriety in certain circles as a man of dubious fame may have been a stumbling block to their future plans. However, as long as his presence activated her ability, Inez was willing to disregard these concerns, as restoring her unique abilities was her highest priority. But another difficulty that stood in Inez's way had to do with Khalid himself. He hadn't given her his answer yet, which made Inez assume the worst: his potential rejection. This prospect gave Ines a sense of uncertainty and made her anxious about the future of their relationship. She realized that she would need to take additional steps to convince Khalid that their union would be mutually beneficial. At this point, Ines realized that she had the task of not only showing Khalid the potential benefits of their relationship, but also convincing him that they could overcome any difficulties together. She had to find a way to show Khalid that their union could be a powerful tool for achieving common goals, and that together they could create something truly meaningful and sustainable. Inez was preparing for the difficult task of changing Khalid's mind, putting all her skill and charisma into the endeavor to convince him of the value of her proposed alliance. That afternoon, the atmosphere in Inez's manor was filled with animated whispers and murmurs when Shamore, a staunch ally and mediator between Ines and the outside world, brought in a fresh stack of letters. With each step Shamore took, she noticed that the amount of correspondence increased by leaps and bounds, no doubt due to the growing rumors of Inez's engagement. These rumors spread with incredible speed, coloring every word with excited curiosity and speculation. The gist of the rumors revolved around the suggestion that Ines was betrothed to the wielder of a demonic sword, a personality shrouded in mysticism and secrets which only whetted the public's appetite for details. Most of the letters sent contained questions, requests for confirmation or refutation of rumors, and a thirst for knowledge about whether the rumors really had merit. Ines, looking through the stack of letters, couldn't help but smile at the thought of how great it would be if all this speculation turned out to be true. However, her gaze stopped on one particular letter that stood out among the rest, a letter from her grandfather. This moment brought excitement to her heart. A letter from her grandfather, a figure with a special place in her life and heart, promised to be a key turning point in the current situation. She realized that the contents of this letter could greatly influence the course of events, determining the direction of her future actions. At that moment, holding the letter in her hands, Ines felt a mixture of excitement and anticipation, preparing to open it and find out what words her grandfather had written to her and how those words would change the course of her destiny. When Ines received the letter from her grandfather, she felt a rush of relief and joy. The news that her grandfather's health had improved and that he planned to return home in a year was a ray of light in the dark corridor of uncertainty and anxiety that had plagued the past few months. It was like the promise of a new chapter in their family life, a chapter filled with hope and restoration. However, in the back of his mind, where feelings and emotions mingled, a shadow of worry surfaced. Ines noticed that she hadn't received a single letter from Hilo, her younger brother, in 2 days. Hilo wasn't just a brother, he was part of her world, a source of unconditional love and pure childlike happiness. Every letter from him was like a message from another carefree world, where the main characters were adventures and dreams. The lack of news from Hilo had made Ines anxious. Her imagination began to paint a variety of scenarios, each of which caused her heart to grow even more anxious. In the moments when the family waited for her grandfather's return, every detail, every signal from loved ones took on a special significance. Ines realized that the silence could have been an accident, but her heart whispered restlessly that it was time to look for answers. In a world where every day brought new adventures and challenges, Ines found comfort in thinking of Hilo, whom she adored immensely. Her admiration for them seemed boundless, for to her Hilo was the gentlest creature under the sun, so delicate and sensitive that even a mere ant under his feet could feel perfectly safe. She repeatedly shared her thoughts, saying that in his presence she feels close to a real angel, whose kindness and tenderness illuminate everything around with light and warmth. Shamore had mixed feelings as she listened to these stories. She felt a little embarrassed by the endless flattering words about Halo. Wanting to change the direction of the conversation a bit, Shamore decided to turn the topic to something more down-to-earth and work-related, as many tasks lay ahead of them, and she felt it was time to focus on them already. However, just as Shamore began to talk about working points, suggesting they discuss the next steps of their joint endeavor, suddenly the air was cut by an unexpected knock. The sudden sound interrupted their conversation, making both of them stop and listen. At that moment, time seemed to stand still, waiting to see what that knock would bring to their already eventful lives. As the tension in the air reached its peak, the door opened softly and the butler entered the study. His appearance at this moment seemed significant, for his visits usually heralded important news. With the dignity reserved for true servants of high rank, he addressed the audience with a news that immediately drew their full attention. The news that Hilo had been involved in a brawl at the academy instantly colored the atmosphere with anxiety and frustration. Ines, whose heart had always beaten in unison with Hilo's fate, could not conceal her dismay and disappointment at the news. To her, who saw only tenderness and kindness in Hilo, such actions seemed alien and incomprehensible. However, the butler, noticing the storm of emotions raging in Ines's soul, hastened to add soothing details. With admirable calmness, he explained that in this difficult situation, Hilo had not only been able to defend himself but had also defeated his opponent, which should have somehow calmed Ines's worries. This news brought a note of pride and relief to the conversation, for Hilo was able to stand up for himself without losing his inner light. As soon as the butler finished his message, the atmosphere in the room barely had time to soften before Hilo himself burst into the study. His sudden appearance was like a wind of change, unpredictable and full of energy. From the doorway, without wasting a second, Hilo asked a question that sounded so unexpected that it might well have overturned the entire previous course of events. He shrieked, demanding an answer about whether his sister was really getting married. Tears gathered in his eyes. This question, asked with such gusto and immediacy, instantly transported everyone present into a new reality, where every next moment promised to be the beginning of something excitingly new and unpredictable. In the halls and corridors of Priscilla Academy, where every corner is filled with whispers of knowledge and ancient secrets, a special collector of talents has found his place. Among all the students shining with their skills and accomplishments, one young man in particular stood out. This young man was Hilo, whose name was continuously the subject of conversation and gossip among the walls of the academy. Not surprisingly, the attention and accolades surrounding him were the cause of his own reluctance to step back into the confines of academia. Hilo, with his unique gift, was the center of attention for faculty and students, which certainly added to his fame, but also imposed a heavy burden of expectations and pressure. This brilliant young man with unique abilities inevitably felt the gaze of his fellow students and mentors, many of whom saw him not just as a gifted student, but as a symbol of the ideals of the academy. The situation presented Hilo with a difficult choice: continue his training while under relentless supervision and constantly meeting high expectations, or seek a different path that would allow him to develop his unique abilities in a more relaxed and less competitive environment. The desire for knowledge and improvement struggled in his soul with the desire to escape the pressure and constant evaluation of others. This inner struggle left him facing a difficult decision about the future of his life and education. In his despair, he turned to Ines, a ray of light in this darkness, a girl who possessed not only wit but an infinite supply of patience. Hilo poured out his experiences to her, criticizing the aspects of academic life that seemed most depressing to him. He tried his best to slander his academy, hoping perhaps for a joint escape or at least support in his discontent. However, Ines, who possesses an amazing ability to see through problems to the core and find a way out where none seem to exist, parried Halo's every complaint. She didn't just listen to him, she offered solutions, skillfully sidestepping the pitfalls and shortcomings of the academic system, finding subtle but effective ways to solve the problems that arose. In the end, in the face of irrefutable logic and Inez's dispassionate view of the circumstances, Halo realized that he had no choice but to return to the walls of the academy. This place, for all its faults, offered him the opportunity to grow and learn, though it made him pay a high price for it. Rare meetings with Ines. His relationship with her had been something of a beacon in the fog, guiding him through the turbulent waters of academic life. But now he was forced to limit himself to brief moments of communication, which made his return all the more painful. With each step back to the academy, his heart grew heavier with the realization that days filled with study and responsibilities lay ahead of him, away from the one who had given him hope and support. One mundane day, as the sun was already slanting toward sunset, creating a soft golden light that lazily crept through the branches of the trees, an intermediary met on Halo's path with a request to deliver a letter to Ines. But the manner in which this mediator presented his request was so haughty that the air around them seemed to thicken with his arrogance. Halo, watching his smug smile and contemptuous look, felt the flames of indignation flaring in his chest. His sister, Ines, was a person of high spirituality and intelligence, a jewel in their family, and he could not allow her to be addressed as a mere postmistress, much less through such an intermediary. The desire to protect her sister from any negative influence was paramount to Halo. With strength and determination in his voice, he rejected the request of his haughty vis-a-vis, declaring that he would not allow a lowlife like him to dare even think of approaching Ines. This moment wasn't just a refusal to hand over a letter. It was a statement of defense, a guarding of the sacred space around Ines from the dark stains of a world that sometimes seemed too cruel and unfair. Halo, standing before this man whose arrogance momentarily faded before his brother's unbreakable will, not only rejected his request, but emphasized his role as protector of the light and warmth with which Ines had illuminated their lives. In response to Halo's firm refusal to hand over the letter, the boy, whose self-importance seemed unshaken, could not refrain from insulting him. The words spoken to Halo were so venomous and unjust that the air around them trembled with tension. He called Halo a worthless brother, words that were calculated to strike at his most vulnerable, his relationship with Ines and his role in her life. Halo's eyes instantly flashed with anger, reflecting the fire that was brewing in his soul. This anger was no ordinary reaction to an insult. It was the embodiment of his unwavering defense of family values, especially his bond with Ines. The boy, seeing that look, instantly felt his safety threatened. He tried to remind Halo of the consequences of a possible fight, mentioning that they could both be suspended from school for violating discipline. Halo, hearing this reminder, smiled suddenly. His smile reflected not only his self-confidence, but also the latent hope that he could return home to Ines, to the warmth of the family home. For Halo, the prospect of being there for her sister and protecting her became more important than any academic achievement. The thought filled him with determination, and the next moment he swung at his adversary, ready to face any consequences just to defend his sister's honor and his own. This moment was not just a response to a challenge, but a symbol of unyielding will and dedication to the family's deepest convictions. As Halo approached the bustling capital city, where every corner was filled with its own secrets and intrigue, he could feel the air becoming saturated with ever-growing rumors. These rumors were not mundane news that could be easily forgotten with a glance through the pages of a newspaper. They concerned the person closest to him, his sister Ines. The whispers and speculation about her impending marriage were so loud that Halo felt them like real pressure on his shoulders. He needed to find out the truth behind these rumors to understand what changes the future held in store. When Halo finally met Ines, his heart pounded in anticipation of a reply. Inez's words, denying the rumors of marriage, sounded like music to him, bringing a sense of incredible relief to his soul. For the first time in a long time, he felt he could breathe freely, relieved of the weight of the anxiety that had pressed down on him all the way. But this moment of relief was instantly replaced by a new flood of feelings when Inez, as if playing with him, declared her intention to have a lover rather than a husband. These words sounded to Halo not only as an unexpected turn, but as a challenge to all the principles and norms to which they were both committed. His mind went into a storm of emotions, for such a statement from Inez seemed to him something unimaginable, something that violated all the foundations of their mutual understanding. Ines shared with Halo her true intentions for Khalad, who she said was not involved with them for love or a long-term relationship. Her main goal was to use Khalad as a means of avoiding unwanted marriage proposals from other suitors and as a key to activating her own hitherto hidden abilities. This revelation filled Halo with a sense of deep relief, for heavy doubts and fears about their relationship and future had long lain heavy on his heart. He was especially pleased to learn that Inez was not only using Khalad as a temporary convenience, but was willing to part with him as soon as she found a way to regain her full abilities. This news brought clarity to their complicated relationship and filled Halo with hope that their bond might be much stronger and more meaningful than it seemed at first glance. Inez, with a note of curiosity and concern in her voice, turned to her brother Halo. She wanted to unravel the mystery behind his recent behavior, which had raised many questions and concerns in their family. She asked about the reasons for the quarrel that led to the unfortunate incident, leaving behind an echo of discord and concern. Halo lied that it was because of the harsh and unfair words spoken by one of the locals against their family. These words struck a nerve in Halo, causing him to become emotional and defending the honor and dignity of his family. She was particularly moved by the way Halo, in spite of his actions, tried to turn the situation in the direction of understanding and reason. He pretended as if he recognized the perniciousness of violence and acknowledged that it was not a good way to resolve conflicts. This gesture, though ostentatious, expressed a deep concern and love for his sister, a desire to protect her not only physically but also morally,